heaven.
Hello and welcome to Who Is Best, a show where I, Claudine, take games that give you choices and rate those choices in a tier list. As Super Smash Bros. Melee was released, two new characters appeared on the western shores that many, including myself, had no idea what series they came from. Those characters would be Marth and Roy. With the release of Fire Emblem the Blazing Sword on the Game Boy Advance, known only as Fire Emblem in the West, we would finally get our first taste of this beloved tactical RPG. And Marth and Roy would be the only Fire Emblem characters to ever appear in a Super Smash Bros. Game. This Game Boy game defined my life for a short period of time as I had never played anything like it. I think many who grew up with the Game Boy Advance probably agree that this was a groundbreaking title, introducing what I thought was a brand new genre. So let's get into it. Today we'll be going over the different recruitable characters in the game. Fire Emblem GBA is a straightforward affair with 30 chapters, 10 of which you follow the first MC, Lyn. The next 20 you choose to follow either Eliwood or John Cena! I mean Hector. Because of this structure, some characters are locked behind a certain route, and many characters are only accessible in the latter half of the game. So this list is going to try and consider that, while also realizing that it is the general makeup of the title. We'll be mainly focusing on who's going to be best towards the end game, though mid and early game usefulness will also be considered. Finally, classes play a massive role in character effectiveness, and just like previous titles we've covered, mounted classes are broken while foot units are hit or miss. Oh, and don't forget to stick around for a bonus round at the end of the video. Let's start with the tier. Bartra isn't only a terrible character, but compared to the other terrible characters in this game, he's even worse. Dorcas has low speed, a terrible class, and low defense. Rebecca has the worst class in the game, the Archer. Will is also an Archer, but is useful in the early game. Wallace demands early grinding to make him viable, and is a forced promotion at level 10. He is also the second worst class in the game, the Armored Knight. Carla isn't just an average character at best, but you have to level up Bartra in order to recruit her. Renault is the last unit you recruit, and is one of the single worst mages in the game. The low tier. Sarah's only usefulness is as an early game heal staff. You can promote her to bishop with a bunch of work, and you'll have a below average mage if you do. Lords get a raw deal in this game as their promotions are locked behind the final chapters of Fire Emblem. Because of this, they tend to lag behind normal units and struggle to catch up once they can. And the first Lord on our list is Eliwood. Sure, he promotes to a mounted unit, but until then he lacks any amazing stats and mainly acts as a jack of all trades. Also, his special weapon, the rapier, is meh at best. Canas has okay base stats, but terrible growths. Also, aside from Luna, dark magic ends up being too heavy to be useful. Louise is a late game sniper that ends up being the second best bow user, but that's not saying much. And that'll wrap up the low tier. Let's move on to the mid tier. Wrath is the best bow user in the game, with his mount taking him just barely into the mid tier, but just barely. Lyn is the second best lord in the game. Though her Myrmidon-like class makes her hard to hit, and she has one of the highest growth rates in the game, her main issue is her class and being locked to swords, though the Mani Caddy does help to negate this. Carol is an optional character that you get instead of Harkin, and you'll always want Harkin. Geitz is a decent pre-promoted fighter with high strength growths. Raven is your basic fighter unit with balanced growths and lower defense. Dart has high strength and speed, making him a hard-hitting unit, though his defense is dangerously low. The final lord on our list is John Cena! Hector. Hector is the best lord and becomes almost unmatched in the early and mid game. But unfortunately he, like the others, is plagued by the late promotion and furious leveling of the lords. For an armor knight, Oswin is actually pretty good with incredible base stats, though his low movement is constantly an issue. Guy is my favorite character in any Fire Emblem game and manages to keep himself right in the middle of this list. He's a better Lyn due to the fact that he can promote early and rack up the benefits of that promotion towards the end game. Lucius and Urk are both early game mages. Urk is slightly better in early game, though Lucius can slightly pass him up in the late game. Vida is our first mounted unit and also one of the last units you recruit. Her base stats are low and her growths are mediocre, but being a flying unit, she can't land any lower on this list. Lowen is the worst Cavalier in the game, both in stats and availability, but Cavaliers happen to be the best class in the game, so he landed here. Fiora is a lesser Florina who comes pre-promoted. The only reason you would want her on your team is for the triple attack. Legault is the second thief you gain in your playthrough. He requires less work than Matthew to make viable, though Matthew is overall a better unit. Nino will probably be one of the most controversial placements. If you got her earlier in the game, she might be one of the better mages. But unfortunately, you gain her at such a low level and have so many better options that she's better left benched. But if you want to put in the time, Nino has the single best growth in the game, rivaling Lynn's. The final member of the low tier is Jafar. Jafar has incredible base stats and the best defense among the thieves. The top tier. Isidore is a pre-promoted Cavalier with god tier speed but low defense and strength. Harkin, though a very late game unit, has amazing base stats and above average growth rates. Heath is incredibly tanky for a flying unit, being one of the few who can take an arrow to the face and live. Unfortunately, he joins at a lower level, requiring some leveling to make him viable. Matthew is such a key character in the early game. Stealing specific items is incredibly important for your later playthrough. Not just that, but despite low strength, his stat growths can lead to an effective assassin. Kent is one of the two first Cavaliers you get and manages to be the less effective of the two with higher defense and speed but low strength. The only thing Hawkeye is missing is speed. Aside from that, he is everything John Cena! Hector should have been. Florina is the second best flying unit in the game. If trained in the early Lyn chapters, she becomes a deadly assassin of the air. Farina is the best flying unit in the game. Her only downfall is that she's locked behind a 20,000 gold paywall, but if you're willing to cough up the cash, she will become a deadly Falcon Knight. The God tier. Athos is an absolutely broken character you gain in the last chapter of the game. The devs literally threw him in to ensure that you would beat the final boss. In fact, with the right equipment, you can solo the final level. Priscilla is a mounted heal staff that becomes one of the most important support units in the game. Seriously, there's no optimal run that doesn't use her. Ninian and Nils are your dancer and bard. Like all other games we've covered, they don't fight but can grant an extra turn or buffs to other party members. Again, there is no final team that doesn't use them. Sane will be the best character throughout your entire playthrough, and is only beat out by one other for very small reasons. You gain him in the second chapter and he sticks around for the majority of your playthrough. Pent is a late game mage that is just hands down the best character. Despite his late game availability, Pent has no flaws whatsoever. He's a statistical beast capable of wielding the strongest tomes and staffs in the game from the get-go. The final member of the list and the undisputed best character in the game is Marcus. He will carry you and your band of weaklings through the final 20 chapters of Fire Emblem and beyond. And that's my list. Which lord did you like the most? Let me know in the comments below. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe, and we'll catch you all later. Bonus round. Top 10 best Fire Emblem GBA characters. Go! Number 10, Ninian. Number 9, Canas. Number 8, Jafar. Number 7, Wrath. Number 6, Florina. Number 5, Sane. Number 4, Hector. Number 3, Lyn. Number 2, Priscilla. And number 1, Guy. John Cena!